Digital colonialism is a real thing. Using other people's data to make profit without their permission is a real thing today. And so you want to make sure that those business leaders are on the hook and accountable for the decisions that they're making from a business perspective, as well as a product perspective as well.
Hi everyone, thanks for tuning into Notes of Design. To help support our mission spread knowledge, we have a very special guest in today's episode. Let's welcome Christopher Reardon, who is an award-winning AI expert with over 25 years of experience as a creative director, product design leader, and 0 to 1 AI-powered product visionary. With a strong focus on AI, Chris has played a pivotal role in shaping the industry, particularly as a head of design for Meta's Responsible AI organization, where he established industry standards that have impacted over 3.6 billion monthly users. His expertise in AI has enabled him to drive innovation and create cutting-edge solutions in various sectors. While at Ogilvy, Chris significantly contributed to defining the IBM Watson brand and platform and successfully launching AI into global mainstream. His strategic insights and creative talents have been instrumental in success of some of the world's best disruptive brands, including Meta, AOL, Apple, Bank of America, Chase, Sony, and IBM. With a rich background in AI, Chris brings a unique blend of technical expertise and 0 to 1 product vision, consistently delivering groundbreaking solutions that have shaped the AI landscape and transformed industries worldwide. In this episode, Chris had shared great insights on designing for AI. We had started the episode by defining what exactly is designing for AI and what unique challenges does it present compared to traditional design approaches. Later then we spoke on some key considerations that designers should consider when working with AI-powered systems, and Chris has recommended us few design principles and methodologies while working on AI projects. Later then we spoke on how to balance the need to create human-centered designs with capabilities and limitations of AI, and how to work with cross-functional teams or triads such as developers, data scientists, and product managers to ensure that AI systems are designed and developed cohesively. Later then we spoke on AI algorithms and models which are often trained on biased data sets, resulting in subjective outcomes. So as a designer, how can we actively address and mitigate bias in AI design? And we had concluded the show by Chris' take on future of design for AI evolving and what are the trends or advancements that designers should be prepared for. Join us every week as we delve into the design world, hearing from visionary leaders who shape our lives and inspire our future. We uncover the stories, inspirations, and insights of design luminaries at the forefront of innovation. Thank you, and until the next time, may your dreams be inspired by brilliance of design. Hi everyone, thanks for tuning into Notes of Design. In this episode, we have a very special guest with us. Hi Christopher, welcome to Notes of Design.
Hi, Tej. It's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
So Christopher, how was your day so far?
It's going great. I'm on the east coast of the US and it's a nice sunny day. And I'm happy to be here chatting about design and AI with you.
That's wonderful, Chris. So if you could give a brief about yourself to our listeners out there.
Yeah, of course. So you might hear an accent. I'm originally from England, but I have been living in the States for more than 20 years. I grew up in a small village in England. I went to public school. My dad was in the US Air Force, and so we moved around quite a bit. Lifestyle kind of really introduced me and exposed me to a lot of different kinds of people, different cultures, different backgrounds from an early age. And so I kind of feel like I'm a bit of a nomad, like I don't really belong anywhere. That's why I kind of love like cities like New York City, where everybody is from everywhere in the world. It's a great feeling. I think that lifestyle also helped me kind of empathize more with people. And so that's why I love being in design and especially in UX, thinking about other people's, where they're coming from and their backgrounds. As a kid, I was always artistic. I used to draw a lot. I used to make my own toys out of cardboard. Used to play with Star Wars figures and build my own spaceships and stuff like that. So I've always been into building and making things. I studied in high school. Had an amazing art teacher in high school, and he really inspired me to believe that I could actually make a living from just being creative. And so I went to Kingston University in Surrey and studied graphic design. I originally was thinking about industrial design and architecture and other things. But at the end of the day, I felt like communications is really like the core to everything. And I wanted to kind of understand and think through that aspect of design. And so I went into that. At Kingston, they really focus on the concept and the strategy behind the design. They do focus on the visual craft and quality, but really the focus is on why you're designing something in the first place. And so I really learned how to think strategically and figure out like what the fundamentals are behind something. We did learn a lot about communication design, and I particularly loved thinking through typography, grids, font sizes, those kinds of things, because those are sort of the atoms of good communication. So I got to, I'm dating myself now, but I got to use hot metal press printing and really learn the old school classical way of setting type on paper. And that's obviously where design has come from. And that's all in the UI that you see today. So I'm still a big fan of design systems, thinking about how words appear on a page or how words now are used in natural language.
Thank you so much, Christopher. So what was your journey into design and how did you start? And what are your tips to the beginners on how to start?
That's a great question. And it's a long story. I graduated in the early 90s and the design space at that time was very conventional. It was print and industrial design and architecture and things. I got into print design, packaging, posters, things like that. One of the first big projects that I worked on was launching the Sony PlayStation. So I designed all the packaging and the collateral for the Sony PlayStation. And I was a video gamer and still am today and really loved the video games. Tried to hide special messages in the posters and in the packaging that only gamers would understand. So, when you see the little button symbols, I would hide special cheat codes in the posters that gamers would be able to unlock, like superpowers and things like that. So again, it was always like trying to add something else to the design and not just be a surface level aesthetic. Learning at college about the importance of ideas has always been, critical to my approach. The why of the work, and even thinking through like visual techniques, like even Michelangelo, right? He went beyond just the aesthetic, and Johnny Ives today. So I think design, the first thing I would say that, the tip is design is about intentionality, right? It's really like trying to think very intentionally about a problem, about the user, about the space, and what you have as tools to go after those things. In around 2000, I decided to get into web design and interactive design. I started designing website, and then I got into education and training. So I was trying to teach people things through, websites. I worked at a company in Los Angeles, and back then there was no such thing as UX. And so I was trying to figure out like, navigation structures, site maps, content strategy, like how do you break down something into something that's chunkable and understandable? How do you design for usability? There were no standards, there were no frameworks. So I started to design frameworks that help me, come up problems in a consistent way, so that I wasn't like reinventing from scratch every single time. I mean, now it's obvious people are using design systems and patterns and, methods. But back then there was no such thing. I think that's still applicable today. Like you still need frameworks to make decisions. I think the decisions and the places that designers work now are more complicated, but start with that first so that you're being consistent in your approach. In 2006, I moved to New York and worked at AOL. I redesigned the entire platform. I led that work. And in that work, I came up with a design system that they even still use today, which is, it's crazy. And that work ended up growing the platform to 250 million users. And, the revenue increased to $2 billion, which is amazing. Thinking through that approach, and again, another tip was auditing the entire system, auditing competitors, and trying to find commonality across all of those things, and then designing in the gaps that were missing, right? So as you look at things where AOL wasn't as strong as others, like how do we improve that area? How are there are places in that system that, nobody is designing for, let's go after that as well. So audits are really a great way to ground new designers in what exists, what's missing, conventions that are applicable today, and how you can help people adopt your platform more easily, because you're going to lean into some of those existing things. So I think that's another tip for designers. And then, in 2009, I decided to move into advertising. The issue I was having, I was working in really amazing digital agencies that were working on incredible products and platforms, but we weren't talking to CEOs and CMOs. We were talking to middle managers and vice presidents. And I really wanted to understand how the CMO was thinking and how the CEO was thinking, because for me, design isn't just about the end user, it's also about the business. And so if you're not, everybody thinks that just designing for the user is going to be the end all and be all of design, and it's not true. You have to design with an understanding of what the business needs to do as well. And so I wanted to talk to CMOs and be in the same room and understand their strategies. I moved to a company called TBWA Chiat Day. I worked on Apple and Michelin and Vonage and other companies. I helped grow the digital experience group. Yeah, we won a lot of awards, which was amazing. And a lot of the digital ideas actually led a lot of the TV campaign work. And this is one of the critical things for designers, especially product designers today, is to learn how to tell really good stories, right? So if you're trying to pitch a product, you got to tell a story. Like, what's the current user problem and what's the future user going to enjoy about your new product? How am I going to make that feel real? How am I going to make that feel compelling? Why should an investor give you money to build that thing? All of those things are predicated on having a great story that people will believe. You need to be charismatic about it. And so you do need to work on your storytelling skills. Even if you're just a UX designer who's working on wireframes, even if you're a developer, you need to be able to kind of position why you're making the choices you're making and why it means something to somebody else. And working in advertising really helped me grasp, we've got 30 seconds to do a TV campaign. You've got to tell a really good story. You've got to really be able to prioritize what's the single most important message that you are trying to deliver. And that has really helped me in the rest of my career. Building a product, thinking through a roadmap, where should we be in 36 months? Let's figure out and work backwards from that on the milestones that will help us get there. All of those things come from storytelling. The other thing too is the CEO is the ultimate decision maker on whether your product gets made, right? And so if you don't understand your CEO, it doesn't matter how much you understand your user. You've also got to be, comprehensive in your approach and think through like the business owner and what is driving them, what Wall Street is doing, what journalists are saying, what shareholders care about, what competitors are doing. You need a broader understanding, not just your user is the only thing that exists. And that is even more applicable today with AI. Because AI is something that more people in the company decide on how it works than the user does. It used to be that the user and the UX designer really were the mouthpiece to the end user, the customer. They're not anymore. There's a lot of other people involved in how an AI system thinks, how an intelligent system thinks. And that goes all the way to the top, to the CEO as well. It even goes to regulators and external experts. It's more of a web of stakeholders that you're designing for now in this future world that we live in now. And so, you really need to broaden your focus as a designer and not just on the end user anymore. The thing that got me really into AI was when I joined Ogilvy as an executive creative director and senior partner. I got to lead the IBM account, and that was over 200 creative people worldwide. There was about 2,000 on the team, and thinking through how IBM should rebrand itself globally was one big challenge. The other challenge was launching IBM Watson. And I got invited to sit on the digital leadership team at IBM and work with their leaders, help think through the go-to-market plan for IBM Watson, what the brand should be, how they should launch the business unit, and even what some of the offerings and services would be within the platform itself. That really made me very interested in the technology and how AI works, not just the storytelling aspect. The storytelling aspect is still relevant today. Like I came up with the idea of thinking about IBM Watson. It's a machine that can learn anything. So who should teach that machine? You want the best minds in the world to teach, that machine, and that's still relevant today, right? To get away from bias and to make sure that AI systems are really inclusive and understand all communities and all perspectives. You want a very diverse group of people from around the world, different levels of education, backgrounds, and so on, abilities. You want AI to be inclusive of all those people. So it's still a relevant concept today. And that from that point, I got into thinking about how the product should work more. I left Ogilvy and then went to work on natural language processing and building virtual assistants.
Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing such an inspirational, wonderful journey with us. So how do you define designing for AI, and what unique challenges does it present compared to traditional design approaches?
That's a really great question, and I could probably talk about this for the next 5 hours, but I'll try and keep it short because I know we have only so much time. Let's start out with what we think. Let's just briefly think about what traditional design is. A traditional product designer is usually trying to design for the largest audience they can. They're trying to design for a finite number of use cases. They're trying to leverage design patterns that people are familiar with, right? They're trying to design services that people can easily navigate without much guidance. You're trying to design for growth, right? You want to try and get as many people to sign up and use your thing as possible. And you want to try and keep engagement really high. Daily active users let's get that as high as we possibly can. So if that's like just a snapshot of what typical day is, AI is different. AI is actually a system that can learn and adapt to users. So the system is going to constantly keep changing, right? It's going to learn new things and adapt, and it's going to change. In the sort of a technical term for that is drift. The AI model is going to drift from its original intended use because it's going to start to learn new things. Sometimes those new things are good, sometimes those new things are bad. And so you have to recalibrate that model once in a while to bring it back to working within the parameters that you think are the right things. The other thing too is that the AI is going to really double down and reinforce behaviors that people have, which again, those social norms in quotes, those can be good and bad. If it's a social norm that's racist, that's not great, right? That's really bad. So some behaviors are good, some behaviors are bad. And so you need to start to think about both the positive and negative of what you're doing. And sometimes you can only see that once you launch, because you have to have a large audience using it to be able to identify those areas where things are problematic. So, it's not as easy as just, let's test a UI against 100 people. It's going to be thousands of people to really start to understand whether or not you've captured equally and fairly all of the communities that you're designing for. Another part of this is there's a bell curve to the audience that you're trying to design for. That large group in the middle, the majority is who you're trying to design for. If you do that, you're going to leave communities off the table who, they don't have enough data. Maybe they're not on the internet that much, right? Like there's not enough infrastructure in that part of the world for us to then kind of understand who they are and design for them. So you kind of want to focus on that bell curve. You want to focus at the edge, not the middle, because if you focus on the edge, you would then lift up those communities that have been historically left behind. Think of people with, disabilities or impairment. If you design for those people, you're actually making it easier for everybody to use. There's a great company in England called OXO, who they make kitchen utensils and tools. They design, this is like 20 years ago, they started to design for people with arthritis or physical impairment. And because they made their tools so easy, everybody found them easy, and their sales just exploded. So if you design for people with accessibility, challenges, you're actually lifting up everybody. The other thing is people have low digital literacy. and designing for that as well. So trying to explain what AI is, how it works, what it's going to deliver in terms of a different kind of outcome than they're used to with a non-AI enabled product, so to speak. Another piece here is typically design is designed for growth, as I mentioned before, and engagement. But actually what you want to design for is accuracy and trustworthiness. So if an AI is telling you an answer, if you're using one of the big LLMs, for example, you want to make sure that it is delivering an accurate answer. A lot of the LLMs today actually invent information completely out of thin air. And so they're very confident in how they talk. It sounds very real and natural, but it's actually complete fiction. And so that's really terrible for the user and for society, because it can lead to disinformation, misinformation, and things like that. So you need to focus on accuracy and trustworthiness first, because this is such a compelling, you have to design for these systems because they sound very authentic and real. That can lead people to believe every answer they give is 100% accurate, and that is not true. So you have to build in systems that kind of show where it's getting its information from. That helps as well. So again, growth and engagement are not a good metric here. It's trustworthiness. The other thing too is you have to design for mental health and people's well-being, right? If you design systems that are so addictive that people use them all the time, that's going to create a lot of mental health issues. Again, if you design systems that give you the perfect answer all the time, people are going to stop learning how to use critical thinking, right? That's not going to be good for them. They're not going to be able to assess whether something is true and honest or whether it's a lie. And that's going to create other problems in society as well. So thinking through those issues is really important. I'll get to another point in this later in the interview where I talk about designing with a human-centered approach.
Thank you so much, Christopher. So what are the key considerations that designers should consider when designing for AI-powered systems? And do you recommend any specific design principles or when working on AI projects?
So AI is one of those things that is very use case specific. So there's not a one size fits all with AI. It's not like I can give you a playbook that, you can just apply it over and over again like a rubber stamp to say, this is how we do AI. But I can say there's like 4 or 5 things that you can use as methods. The first and probably the most important is to co-create with your intended audience, right? So when you're brainstorming a product, bring in the communities that you're designing for and get their perspectives. It's not really a new idea, but what is kind of new is making sure that those audiences, as much as you can, are actually on the team. Right? If you can have a diverse team, when you're moving quickly to hit that next deadline, you want somebody in the team to be an advocate for different aspects of the community that you're designing for. If everybody looks the same, comes from the same background, you're going to miss a lot of things, and it's going to be a very myopic bias approach. And so, both the audience and the team working. Try and make it as diverse as you can. The co-creation part is really fun if you can bring in those audiences of all different backgrounds and ages and genders and everything. It's amazing where a great idea can come from. The other part of it too is their DNA gets baked into the product idea. So if you can involve them in the creative process, they're more likely to adopt what comes out the other end. It's a much more productive approach. The second thing on the list is to bring in ethics, policy, and human rights as early as you possibly can. I've often brought in policy experts into initial 0 to 1 brainstorms where we're just trying to think through, like, let's try and come up with 20 ideas today of what we could do with natural language. Great. If I add an ethicist and a policy expert into the room and we have them do a little pitch at the beginning where it's like a 5-minute or 10-minute slideshow on like why is ethics important, or why is the Digital Services Act in the EU important, suddenly everybody in the room is grounded on some fundamental things that help them make better decisions. So if you bring in some of those stakeholders that aren't usually used to thinking about creative ideas early on, that can really help guide the conversations towards things that really make a difference in people's minds. The third thing, this is going to sound a little strange, but also bringing in shareholders. And I don't mean literally shareholders. I mean people who can stand in for shareholders. So business people, product managers, people who deal with kind of the monetization revenue side of the business. Having them vested in that early brainstorm is also important because they can start to see the tensions in the room between doing the right thing and making money, and what are the trade-offs and why are we deciding to make these trade-offs. Digital colonialism is a real thing. Using other people's data to make profit without their permission is a real thing today. And so you want to make sure that those business leaders are on the hook and accountable for the decisions that they're making from a business perspective, as well as a product perspective as well. Another technique we use, this is the fourth thing, is red teams. So red teams are typically, ethical hackers, if you will, that you hire to test your security of your app. In product design, we use red team thinking in how could the happy path of our AI product go terribly wrong? Let's do an entire brainstorm around taking what we think is an amazing idea and turning it into a weapon, or having it drift from its intended use and it starts to create outcomes that aren't positive. If you can think through those negative outcomes, you can decide, okay, we're not going to do this. You can decide, oh, well, we can figure out some ways to mitigate those things and stop those things from happening. Or we can slightly change tactics and try and come up with some kind of compromise that doesn't lead to such negative outcomes. So really thinking through, and it's a really fun process. Like being creative about being bad is a really fun, brainstorm to have. But then you can come out of that with a better, more thoughtful, and more robust product idea. The fifth thing is using service design techniques. So I mentioned earlier, design systems are a big thing. I think design is actually going to start to move towards systems design. So not design systems, but systems design. How does a whole company work to make an AI think? How do we make sure that the whole development process that engineers are using and data scientists are using won't inject bias or error or harm into a product? Because by the time it hits the glass, by the time the UI is in front of somebody, it's too late, right? So using service design to unpack the entire factory floor, if you will, to figure out who is touching what and when, what tools they have, what education they have, what guidance they have from policy and compliance and from ethics in doing their job, so that by the end, everything that comes together delivers something that is really valuable and beneficial to society. Then the last thing is writing down your principles and values, making sure that the internal stakeholders are aligned on those values and principles, even writing things like manifestos. Then plastering those things everywhere and using them, especially when you're doing a design sprint from scratch, when you're in a workshop for the first time, or you're making a really big key decision. When you have those moments where anybody's making a decision of any material value, you want to ground them in those principles and values. The more you live and walk and breathe and eat those values, the more consistent your decisions will be. And you make sure that those values and principles have been reviewed and aligned with the stakeholders and the audiences that you're designing for, because then that way everybody's on the same page and you're representing the best of your thinking.
Thank you so much, Christopher. So how do you balance the need to create human-centered designs with the capabilities and limitations of an AI?
That's a great question. AI is fascinating because it has an ability to be far more nuanced and personalized than any other technology we've ever created, right? So if you think about mobile applications today, they're somewhat static. Being human-centered, we're all different people. We all think differently. We come from different backgrounds. We have different interests. Personalization is one way to be even more human-centric, right? Because I can deliver just the features that you want that make sense to you in a way that you'll use them and get benefit from them. And so AI can help to really get us to a place where we can have very customized experiences. So I think in the future, design systems will be managed by AI. It won't be managed by design managers like myself. And what that means is that we'll be able to plug and play hundreds of versions of an application that really are driven by the AI. So when you open a new app, Tej, you'll be able to say, hey, I'm not going to need this feature. Okay, we'll turn that feature off. We'll make it disappear entirely. But I do need this feature. And so the AI will bring that feature to the front. So what that will lead to is instead of us designing just one kind of product for everybody, we'll be designing an individual product for everybody, because the cost of design and development is becoming close to zero. So we'll be able to manage much more diverse applications to match to the diversity of the people that we're designing for. So I think that's where human-centered is going to become really powerful. I think there's a double-edged sword here too, though, because that means that you're seeing a different version of the app than I am. And so your worldview of that app is going to be different than mine. And that could impact trust between us, because you could say, hey, Uber works this way for me, but hang on, it doesn't work that way for me. Where's my feature that you're getting? That's not fair. So you can see how that personalization is both a positive and a negative. And so we're going to have to figure out ways to kind of navigate those two things. This is a really tough next one that I'm struggling with is designers, try and make everything as convenient as possible for people. The problem with AI doing that is that AI is going to be able to basically take the entire knowledge of the human race and give you the right answer at the right time. And that's going to make you very lazy. It's going to make us lose our ability to have critical thinking and things like that. So the idea of designing into systems intentionally failure, right? So imagine people not being able to rely on AI 100% because they have to go do some of the homework themselves. I have a 15-year-old son. If he can just type into an LLM, and get all the answers that he needs from school, he's not going to learn anything. Being human-centered is also about being a good parent to humans, right? And forcing them to learn, forcing them to fail, because that's how we learn as people. We only learn critical thinking by failure. We only learn resilience through failure. And resilience in today's world is huge, right? With climate change and all of the challenges around the world, people need to learn resilience. And so we can't have systems just being, so powerful that they reduce people to just being passive. People have to learn and struggle. And so I think being human-centered means, making systems that aren't fully capable of everything.
So how to work with cross-functional teams or triads such as developers, data scientists, and product managers and other folks involved in the triad to ensure that AI-powered products are designed and developed cohesively?
That's another good question. You're full of good questions. Well, firstly, the biggest thing with AI is not everybody is on the same page with what AI is in the first place. If I go to Google and ask Google what is an AI model, and I go to Apple and I go to Microsoft and others, I'm going to get slightly different answers. If I go to the US government and ask them what AI is, I'm going to get a different answer from the EU. So defining expectations and definitions of AI is the first thing that you have to do. Everybody has to be on the same page when they say, what is an AI model? What is AI fairness? What is equity? What is AI transparency, and so on. So if you don't have those definitions clearly defined, you're going to be talking past each other and nobody's going to be able to develop anything. So the first thing to do, even if you have to take it from the internet and you have to take it from other people's definitions, codify your definitions within your own organization of this is what we mean when we say X, Y, and Z. You need a glossary of terms of those things. Then you need to conduct research and build hypotheses and opinions around societal norms and equities, right? So you have to understand what is working for people in society and what isn't, what are biased, what is not biased, and understand those things as well and define those things. You have to define how you're going to uplift society and what that looks like measurably, not just from a philosophical perspective, right? You need actual metrics, because if a product team is designing and engineers are building, they're going to be looking at numbers on a dashboard, and they're going to need to know that those numbers align with those goals. Defining definitions, I've said, and gaining alignment is super important. You also have to gain alignment with the broader industry. You know, you can't do it in a walled garden. Coming up with your own definitions that only works for you is not going to work for regulators or anybody else. So you have to extend your network to make sure that you're inclusive of external stakeholders, civil and human rights experts, you know, and so on, regulators. And then, you know, I think I mentioned this before, you have to consider your shareholders. AI will bring massive value to your business, but, you know, it can't do it at the cost of harming people and harming society. Even deciding when and where to use AI, you know, AI can often replace aspects of people's jobs. Even deciding about that is a responsible decision. Should we do this? Are we planning for, if we remove 40% of people's work, what should we do to replace that to help, you know, keep them employed? So there's not even, it's not just technical and engineering and product decisions. These are societal level decisions that you have to take into account to be a reasonable citizen in the world. And then you have to frame your responsibility work through the lens of opportunity and value. It's no good saying, well, we have to do this because it's the right thing. You're in a business, you work in a business, right? Doing the right thing isn't enough, you know, for the business to make changes. Businesses need to make changes because they can grow. And so you have to find a way to frame doing the right thing through a lens of growth, right? It's going to help us win in the long term. It's going to help us gain new communities, trust. It's going to help us reduce the problems that our products are delivering, and so people are going to trust them and value them more.
Thank you so much, Christopher. So how does AI algorithms or models are often trained on biased data sets, resulting in subjective outcomes? So how can designers actively address and mitigate bias in AI design?
Yeah, I think some of the things that I mentioned about bringing in the stakeholders and the audiences and things like that will help that, right? Because you start to hear from the audience itself, like where things could be off. But I do think you have to think about AI and LLMs slightly differently in a typical product. A single product is typically focused on a certain number of use cases, a certain number of personas that you're designing for, right? And a finite type of service. AI models, on the other hand, are more like they're broad and can be used for lots of different things. And sometimes they can be used in ways that they weren't originally intended for. Right. So a good example here is like facial recognition. Like initially, you know, some companies were using that to help you identify family members in your photographs on your phone, right? Which is great. It's like, oh, okay, I want to see all the pictures of myself and my mum. That's awesome. But the unintended use of that is, you know, people profiling people with facial recognition technologies that can lead to negative outcomes in the legal system, right? Like that's not a good use. And so you, on the one hand, you designed it in with this nice, you know, benign use case in mind, but at the other end of the scale, it can get reused in a new way that's not great. So you have to be careful about that. LLMs are like the infrastructure that I think, you know, is like the plumbing that is the future plumbing. What is interesting is language is the oldest technology that humans have developed, right? It's the thing that we all use every day that helps us stay connected to our families. It helps us communicate with our business colleagues and so on. It is the foundation of society. How we talk, how we write, that's how we share knowledge from generation to generation. LLMs are taking advantage of that, and that's the infrastructure and foundation of our society. So it's definitely not the same as designing a product. Like, that is a fundamental shift. And so we have to be much more careful about how we build those systems and how we train those systems. Gathering and curating that data is incredibly important and sensitive. You know, taking data from communities without their permission and then using it to create businesses that make money without giving back to them is not an ethical approach. So you have to include and make those benefits available, including, you know, payment back to those communities. And this goes beyond just LLMs. This goes to, you know, you're seeing it in the news with artists and generative AI, where people's, you know, design styles and photography styles and artistic styles are being ripped off through generative AI, and they're not getting any benefit from that. So I think copyright is obviously a huge thing here. But I think also from a community perspective, there are, you know, communities that are having their languages co-opted without their permission. And that is not an ethical thing as well. Designing for the minimal data set. So if you're designing for a broad community, you want to design for the community that has the most limited data set, and use that as the benchmark for everybody, so that everybody is evenly addressed. You can't, you know, Western world countries have such massive amounts of data that they dwarf everybody else. And so you automatically get bias because of that. So you have to reduce everything to the minimum data set and train against that. That helps. You have to create very rigorous verification on that data for accuracy, labeling it, and making sure it's all done in a consistent and responsible way. You have to measure and ensure for AI fairness on a regular basis. I think I mentioned earlier, models drift over time, so you have to make sure that they're really focused on their intended use. And yeah, again, going back to making sure that people's data is being used with permission. I'd say one thing that is really important is transparency with users. You have to make AI-enabled features opt-in, not opt-out by default. You have to make it clear to them how their data is being used. You have to let them decide whether they want to share that data or not. And you have to give them an alternate that is a non-AI enabled version of that same kind of functionality without them having to share their data in that way.
Thank you so much, Christopher. So how do you see the future of designing for AI evolving, and what trends or advancements should designers be prepared for?
Again, great question. I think designers in the future are going to be working on systems that are contextually aware, right? So, you know, why would I use a chat interface versus, say, a standard button-based UI? Because information that I can gather from the user goes beyond the scope of what a simple UI can do, right? I can tell you a lot more through words than I can through pushing buttons. I can go further. I could say if the AI could look at my face and my gestures and my body language, even that it could learn more, right? There are even systems today that can read MRIs and synthesize MRI data into what I'm thinking at the moment. So you can imagine that that's all amazing because I can gather more information from the user in a way that a simple UI today couldn't do. And so I can get closer to understanding a human and being empathetic to the human and delivering really what they need. Again, you know, it's a double-edged sword. Being that intimate with a person means that I really know all their secrets and I can manipulate them with that information. So that's why responsible AI is so important, because you can't use that data in a way that is could be potentially harmful to that person. So I think that's designers are going to design for context. So Chris is smiling. What does that mean? Chris is, frowning, what does that mean? If the AI can understand those things, that's going to change how the AI reacts to those things. I was working on a natural language assistant that could both understand the words that I was saying and my facial expressions and put those two things together and infer other things, right? And so if I'm saying hello, but I look sad, you can automatically, as a person, tell that there's something wrong. Okay, I should follow up with a question. What happened? So the AI is going to have this a much more human-like understanding of our need, and that's a more complex design problem. So designers are going to move away from static current UIs to more contextually aware UIs that are fluid, that move with the person's changing states. They're going to have to think about how to prioritize. Should I show a picture right now? Should I say something via voice? Should I do something via text? Should an avatar appear and smile? All of those things become more complex. And it's like training the AI to know when to show something or when not to show something, when to follow up with a question, to clarify something, all those kinds of things. So we're trying to get to what is that unique user's specific need. I want clarity around that. Any good presenter knows, okay, I should show you a picture right now, or I should say one thing, or I should stop talking for a second and listen maybe for another second. Teaching AI systems to know how to handle conversations in that way is going to be the future. I think organizations are going to have to change. They're going to have to adopt that kind of design thinking across the whole company. So design isn't going to be focused on UX, UI anymore. It's going to be designed on systems design and systems thinking. How do you get a whole organization to agree on an ethical framework for how an AI makes decisions? A good analogy here is autonomous vehicles. There are 3 people crossing the road. One is 70, one is 21, and one is a dog. We are going to have to hit one of them. Which one do I hit? How do I make that decision? That's not going to be one person making that decision. That's going to be a group of people deciding, what's the right framework to have in place for the AI to make that decision at that time. Designers are going to help facilitate those conversations because they're empathetic and they've been used to kind of advocating for users. Lastly, designers will have to prototype those thinking machines. What does a thinking machine do in society? What could be the potential outcomes? Telling those stories. Storytelling is massive here. Give me 6 different versions of how this AI could benefit the world, and give me 6 versions of how this could go horribly wrong, right? Tell those stories, and then let's design to fixing those things and making sure that those are the right things that we're really focused on.
Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing all these wonderful insights with us. So could you please share with us, how does your day look like? Any interesting stories?
Sure. Most of my days are pretty boring. I'll tell you that. I'll start there. It's meeting with people to discuss ongoing project work, timelines, how to measure whether we're making positive impact, those kinds of things. With the pandemic, a lot of the conversations are one-on-ones with people. They're, challenges with the project, or they're challenged with, how do I get to the next level in my career? What can I do better? That kind of stuff. And so it's a lot of coaching and mentoring, helping with career planning, helping people identify the next big problem, or how to really understand whether you're working on the most important problem. The funnest parts of my day are strategizing, new work, attending critiques, being in workshops, and really, doing offsites with the team, getting together in person, hanging out with people. I love that kind of stuff. I spend a good, hour a day, if I can, reading regulations, white papers, articles on the latest breakthroughs in the industry to just stay current. I think as a manager and as a leader, you do need to stay connected to the work, really tightly, because the work is moving so quickly that if you're not involved, then you can really lose, being relevant in that space. I think one of the most important things with a manager and a director is building a space that is in an environment that's really safe for people to just be able to say anything and talk about anything, that no topic is taboo. I want to create a space where people can share their concerns, where they can call me out on challenges or problems they see with me. Because if you don't create that trusting environment, you're going to miss out on people sharing their best ideas, or they might notice something where the team is going in the wrong direction. And if they don't feel like they're empowered to say the right thing, that can go unsaid for a long time and create problems as well. So I think that's, one of the most important things. Interesting stories. Wow, I've got a lot of them. I think one of the biggest things was working with regulators and figuring out that they weren't all on the same page about what regulation was, and being in workshops with them and really it was almost like a therapy session for everybody in the room to try and really get to well, why do you believe that? Why do you think the words mean this? And getting to a place where everybody actually came to a new conclusion on what they thought the regulations for AI should be. And we ended up going in a completely different direction that ended up being much more effective and is now being adopted by the industry. Other companies are using some of the designs that we came up with, and the processes that we came up with. So, I think assuming that everybody gets it is the wrong thing, and actually, trying to design for the people that don't get it is actually a better approach.
Thank you so much, Chris. So we'll conclude this show by your 3 favorite book recommendations and people who inspire you the most in this space.
This is fun. It took me a while to think about this. I think, the books that inspire me are more about how to be a good person in the world and how to apply those thoughts to my work. I'm trying to design for a large community that I don't necessarily understand and have access to. And so how can I make better decisions on their behalf? Because once I make a decision, that gets it, put into a product, and then there's not much we can do about it. So one of the authors that I subscribe to is Peter Singer. He's an ethicist, and the book that he has written, The Most Good You Can Do, is really fascinating. It's about what you can do with the limited resources that you have and make the biggest positive impact in the world. He has another book called Practical Ethics too. So if you're designing AI systems, I recommend you become a fan of Peter Singer. Simon Sinek, Start With Why. It's a fantastic book. One of those books that you can go back to over and over again. It's a light read, but it really helps ground you in, am I making the right decisions? Why am I making these decisions? Even for yourself, who am I as a person? Where is my career going? What do I want to do? Another one, and this kind of came out of the pandemic, is, the pandemic for a lot of people made them feel like, why is this happening to me, right? Why is the world attacking me? What have I done to deserve this? Why is the karma coming back to me? The Stoic Challenge by William Irvin is a great mind trick on how to remember that the universe is chaos, and that there are this idea of Greek gods, the Stoics, who would play with people's minds as if they were toy. And if you can imagine that there's somebody trying to mess with you just to see how resilient you are, then you change that whole dynamic into a game. And I can laugh at the imaginary gods and say, oh, today you're not going to win. You're not going to upset me. I'm going to bend and find a new way around this problem, and it's not going to, impact me and change who I am as a person. So the Stoic Challenge has got some great stories. It's again a light read, and it just helps you reframe. I think reframing is a big thing. Reframing a problem into an opportunity is a big thing. In terms of podcasts and other people who inspire me, Demis Hassabis, he's the CEO of DeepMind. There's a DeepMind podcast that's fantastic, and hearing him talk about the big challenges that he's focused on, like clean energy and figuring out how to cure cancer and, healthcare in general, those are fantastic. Shankar Vedanta on the Hidden Brain podcast. That podcast is just fascinating to understand how people can think in so many different ways. It's one of those things that I listen to when I go on a walk or if I'm in the car or whatever. And it just is always inspiring to think about how diverse our collective species is. And then there's another group of podcasters, Adam Grant, Simon Sinek, and Brene Brown. They're just fantastic. How they think about humans and humanity and our core principles, those are all inspiring to me.
Thank you so much, Chris, for sharing all these wonderful recommendations with us. And it was really a great honor to host you on the show. And thank you so much for your time. We are looking to host you again in our upcoming episode. Thank you.
Tej, it's been such a pleasure. I'm so inspired by your podcast and the work that you've been doing and how you've been giving back to the community. It's such a fantastic endeavor. I know the next podcast is going to be successful. So I wish you the best on that. And thank you so much for having me today.